Hello Internet, my name is Ben, and today I'd like to talk to you about the sequester. Spoiler alert, it's stupid. So as I mentioned in my video about the US debt, the debt isn't as big a problem right now as some people seem to think. Our debt is super cheap right now, and we actually don't spend all that much money a year paying it off. However, there is some reasonable fear that we could have a debt problem in the future, and the issue is with what the federal government is spending its money on. So the total US budget authority right now is about $3.6 trillion a year, and it's broken down into two broad categories: mandatory spending and discretionary spending. So the mandatory spending is about 64% of the US total budget, and it includes things like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. It also includes things like the money we spend servicing the debt and certain tax credits and unemployment programs and like salaries for federal judges and stuff. The other 36% is discretionary spending. About half of discretionary spending is spent on defense, and the other half is spent on every other thing that the government does, like federal law enforcement, and NASA, and science grants, and the USDA, and roads, etc. So the issue is with mandatory spending, especially Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. These three programs are currently about 45% of the total US budget. They're also really popular programs, so they're probably not going away anytime soon. But because people are living longer, and medical costs keep going up, the cost of these programs is expected to double over the next 20 years. Quick side note, the increasing cost of healthcare is one of the reasons that college has become so expensive recently. You see, the two biggest things on any state budget are education and healthcare. So if healthcare costs go up, there's less money for the state to spend on colleges, and students end up picking up the difference. So anyway, the problem is with the increasing cost of mandatory spending. This is a long-term problem that requires a long-term solution. So to force themselves to come up with a solution, Congress included in the Budget Control Act of 2011 a series of automatic spending cuts called a sequestration. These cuts would take place automatically if Congress couldn't cut $1.2 trillion from the budget, or find another $1.2 trillion in revenue, or a combination of the two. Side note number 2, this use of sequestration as a threat is not unprecedented. The Budget Reconciliation Act of 1990 threatened across-the-board cuts if the deficit rose from year to year, and this was one of the big factors that led to the budget surplus in 1998. This policy was extended until 2002 when war and recession meant that deficit spending started to make a lot more sense. Well, I mean, made more sense if you were a fan of Keynesian economics anyway. So as you all know, Congress was not able to come up with a deal, and sequester took place, and here's what it did. In terms of defense, it cut about $450 billion, or about 10% over 10 years. In terms of other discretionary spending, it cut about $300 billion, or about 8% over the next 10 years. So that's a total of about $750 billion from discretionary spending. In terms of mandatory spending, it cut about $170 billion from programs, and about $150 billion from paying down the debt. Now it's important to point out that most people think that these cuts are a very bad idea because they're across-the-board cuts and make no distinction between good programs or bad or just simply out-of-date programs. And what's more important is that these cuts do nothing to deal with the underlying issue, which is the increasing cost of mandatory spending programs. Both Medicaid and Social Security were exempt from the cuts. Medicare was cut by $160 billion, but that's not going to do anything to stop Medicare costs from doubling in the next 10 years. So basically, we had a long-term problem with mandatory spending, so Congress created a short-term problem with discretionary spending. And then they solved neither of them. This would be like if your doctor told you were overweight, and if you didn't drop 30 pounds, you were at risk for developing heart disease, and you responded by cutting off your arm. Sure, technically you may be 30 pounds lighter, but you're still fat, and now you have one less arm. But yeah, as I've said before, the government's not a business or a person. It'll bounce back. Everything will work out. The reason we're in this situation in the first place isn't because of any kind of bad government policy, it's because of demographic shifts. People are living longer and longer lives, and older people require more medical treatment. So mandatory spending in terms of Social Security and Medicare are gonna go up. That's not gonna change. But this demographic shift is going to smooth itself out. With more retired people living longer, and more people going to college full-time, and less people having babies, means you're gonna have more consumers, but less producers. This will mean lower unemployment, and higher wages, and more government revenue to pay for the increase in spending. So yeah, while the sequester is kind of dumb, everything will work out fine. I promise. And thanks for watching. You can subscribe to me on YouTube if you want to get more of these videos. And if you have any ideas about what I should explain next, I'm open to suggestions. Oh, and if you want to check my math on any of this, you can get all the raw data from the Congressional Budget Office at www.cbo.gov. And again, thanks for watching. Peace.